All right, so my name is Myriam Glez. I am a former Olympic synchronized swimmer, originally from France. I started when I was 6 years old. I made my way to the national team with the French national team, and I competed in the Sydney Olympic with that team. I retired about 2 years after the Sydney Olympics to go to business school, and I started a career in marketing and communication for a hotel company. Eventually, I ended up moving to Australia with that company, and I resumed synchronized swimming, now competing for Australia at the Beijing Olympics in 2008. I retired again after that, moved to England with my family. I worked with the English team coaching before the London Games. And then eventually we moved back to the US, my husband being from America. And I started working for the team, the US team, the US synchronized swimming team as the high performance director and then the CEO. I retired I left that position 2 years ago and I started Athlete Soul, which is a nonprofit organization that helps athletes transition out of sport.
Okay, so I can see the tie-in from that already because you've retired so many times that it's easy to say, hey, what do I do when I retire? Well, in your case, you went back and swam again. Now, when you go from one national team to another, or let me ask you this way, did you have any idea when you moved to Australia you were thinking of still swimming?
Absolutely not. So the first time I retired, for me, that was it. I thought that I really dived into a corporate career, working for my company at the time. And I thought that would be it. The reason I came back is because it was sort of by accident. I was trying to build a social network while living in another country. And so that's sort of how I got back into swimming. And then eventually they asked me if I wanted to compete for the country, and my company decided to support me as well and sponsor me through the process. So I had no idea originally, although I'm a professional retiree. I had no idea that I would go back into the sport. And even afterwards, when I came back on the high performance and coaching side and management of sport, also I had never planned on doing that. So all by accident.
Well, and that begs the next question of, and I know a lot of former athletes, and we'll touch this when we get into Athlete Soul, a lot of former athletes assume or are channeled into, I'm no longer competing, now I'll coach. Had you had any idea that you wanted to do that, especially in England? Or is that another one of the things that kind of went, oh, here's another chance?
So I coached pretty early on. Already when I was competing at the highest level, I was coaching younger kids on the weekend during summer camps. So I would always been involved in coaching, and I knew this would be something I would do, but not as a professional main career. What happened when we moved to England is I had to leave my company. We moved for my husband's job, and I went to visit the National Training Center for the British team and to meet people and see what was happening, and ended up being offered a job. So again, it was sort of the circumstances that brought me back to the pool. It was not necessarily a choice,
right.
But I really enjoyed the side of high performance management and the ability to bring some of those corporate and business skills that I had learned back into the sport industry.
Okay, so then we end up in the United States. How did that transition occur?
So I really had a great experience in England working for the English team. And then after that, I really thought, okay, this could be a career that I pursue and continue. So when I moved to the US, I looked for job openings with the national governing body, and there were some things available, so I applied. So that was more of a natural transition from what I had done in England. But it was always in the back of my mind of trying to combine basically my two experiences or my two passions from sport and the business side.
Okay, so you've had the opportunity to go to the Olympics for 4 different countries and 4 different Olympics. Now, I'll try not to ask a simple question. What was it like representing each one? Because I'm sure you've answered that 15,000 times. But as you transition into what you're doing now, how do you get people to understand or get to feel that same thing in their next job of, or can they, of representing a country in the Olympics or walking in the opening ceremonies or being involved there? How do we make that transition?
The transition from your athletic career to the next life, I think is really challenging because it happens pretty early on in life. And I think it happens at a moment where, as a person, you're not necessarily completely formed, I guess, or matured, like other young individual may have had time to explore different things they want to do while they're in their teenage years or in college, where often elite athletes did not necessarily have that time. So I think that period of exploration will somehow happen after they retire from sport. But what the way we try to work with the athlete is to really help them figure out for them specifically, what does success look like for you? What are you looking for in life? So there's a whole set of tools that we use to help them explore and discover what they want to do next, because we really believe that the more aligned they can be with what they want, the better they'll transition and the easier it will be, and then the more fulfillment they'll find afterwards.
Is it easy to assume then that success is based on what you want it to be, not necessarily what it's been before? Because winning a gold medal is one way of being successful, but maybe chairing your own company or making the big sale or writing the novel or whatever, that can be a different kind of success, but just as important?
Absolutely. And I think trying to identify that early on, and often athletes haven't had a chance to even consider those questions beforehand, because you have to be so committed to what you're doing. And it always starts with a lot of passion, and then the commitment, and then, the years after years fighting for that goal. So you never really had the time to go back and reflect and figure out, okay, I like this, but there's got to be other things that I like and I want to do. And so spending time, grieving your career while exploring other things and other interests. I mean, ideally, you would want to be developing those interests early on, even during your athletic career, but it's not always a possibility.
Did it help you having retired, then having a chance to live a quote unquote normal life, and then going back into the crucible of being in that intense chaos again? Did it help you be able to see and focus on how different it is from one to the other?
Absolutely. Absolutely. My second experience in the sport was completely different. First of all, I, returned by choice. I had done a lot of things that I wanted to do, which were traveling, work in a corporate environment, going to school. It gave me more perspective. It also gave me the confidence to understand that I was able to do something else. And I think often, and that sounds kind of crazy, but often athletes think they're good at one thing and they can't transfer that.
Right.
So I had that confidence that I could fall back on my feet, regardless of what happened with that second experience. And it also was very freeing with the sport, because you knew you had something to fall back on. You had done it before. So then you go into this new experience much more freely and much more confident.
Well, we always talk about on this show passion, and it's usually when you've decided at the age that you decided I'm going to be a synchronized swimmer. I believe we have to call it artistic swimming. I'm sorry about that. That you have that passion to go to the pool every day, to put in the hours. And as we've talked to some of the other swimmers in the last few weeks, we don't understand, the lay people don't understand the effort and the time commitment it takes to be in the pool. I was talking to someone the other day. If you're 5'4" and your partner is 5'8", you have to work that out, how you look in the water, under the water, out of the water.
Yeah.
Those kind of things and you have to have the passion to sustain that. So is it, when you get out of your athletic career, you have to find something? Is it helpful to find something that you're passionate about or do you have to determine what your new passion is?
So I think you're nailing it, first of all, on the commitment and the hours, especially in synchronized swimming or artistic swimming. It's a lot of hours, often a certain number of years. So it takes a lot of space in your life, if not your whole life. So when you get out of it, you got to figure out, how you're going to fill that space, whether it's with your professional career or a multitude of things. I think for me, I was lucky enough that I had a lot of other passions outside of synchronized swimming from an early age. I was lucky to had done a lot of mountain trip with my family and loved the outdoors and skiing. So I knew that there was other hobbies that I liked that I could continue to do, or running. I definitely filled a lot of space with continuous sport after I retired, in an effort to sort of remain athletic and remain in that field. And then I think from a professional perspective, I really from my first retirement, I really dived into my career and investing time in that. But everybody would have a different experience, and I think some athletes will fall into family life, professional career, a new passion. You see some athletes transferring from one sport to triathlon, if they were a runner. So there's different ways, I think, to figure out what comes next for you.
Is it to the point where, do you still get wet? Do you still jump in the pool every now and then? I know, if you're a shot putter, you just don't walk down the street and pick up a rock and throw it. Is it? Do you go past the pool and go, I should? Yeah, never mind.
It's interesting because I talked with a friend yesterday about this exactly. So no, I don't do a lot of swimming. I don't feel the need for it. I did early on. So the first few years after I retired, I did a lot of ocean swimming. I would continue to go to the pool on a regular basis. I don't really need it anymore. I do all the things. I love to do Pilates, yoga. I love to go outdoors and run and bike. So it's been interesting for me to get into other sports. I don't necessarily miss the pool that much, but I know some other swimmers do.
Well, but the reason I asked that question because is, again, talking with athletes, soul, making that transition where, if you, for example, are in the shot put, you don't have shot put competitions in your backyard. If you're a wrestler, you just don't go to the grocery store and wrestle somebody. So is part of making the transition getting out of your head or getting into your head, I don't do this anymore. And that's okay. And say, I don't go to the pool 7 times a week anymore. I don't go to the track and jump over stuff and run fast. I have to do other things. But again, channeling that energy, that passion, that time commitment into something else.
Yeah, I think it's a big part of retirement, especially early on, like the early days after you're retired. I think it goes 2 ways. You have some athletes who will go from fully training to nothing, or perhaps taking up other sports, and then you will have those that can't really quite go away from it and will somehow continue to do it. I know for myself, after I retired the first time, I took on running big time, and I would run, multiple hours, several times a week. And I think I craved the feeling that you get when you're exercising more than anything else. I didn't necessarily miss the team effort. I didn't miss training with the group or being in the water. I just missed the feeling of going home and being exhausted right. and just like that, just when it takes over your whole body. So I think everybody is different. I've heard different stories. I think you're right, though. There are certain sports that you can't really do on a casual recreational basis. You don't really do gymnastic casually. So I think for those sports specifically, and I guess synchronized swimming is a little bit like that, you have to learn, you have you have to learn to exercise for fun, for health, for social purposes.
Okay, so when we're helping others to transition, what skill sets are good to have from your sports career, and what skill sets don't translate at all from your sports career?
I think there are a lot of skill sets that transfer from your sport career. It really depends on which sport you're coming from and
Right.
what you've pushed the most. And you know, the typical one we hear all the time: resiliency, hard work, commitment, teamwork. But I think there are some others on communication, analyzing problem. I think athletes are very creative. They're very organized. They're able to look at what the problem is and define multiple ways to solve it, and then pick a strategy and commit to it. And I think this is exactly what you need in the business world. So all of those skills transition really well. I think there is a mindset adjustment that needs to happen, and that relates more to perhaps the way we behave and communicate in a sports world where everything is pretty straightforward. You will say what you think. You're used to receiving pretty harsh feedback or pretty clear feedback on what you're doing on a regular basis and immediately after your actions, which you won't get that in the business field. So I think that's definitely an adjustment, and that relates also to a speed of work. In a bigger company, you will not have an ongoing feed of immediate feedback. And sometimes that's a little bit hard for athletes to deal with because they feel lost. They feel that they don't know where they at, where they stand. And they're used to trying something, changing, adjusting really, really quickly. So I think athletes do very well in an entrepreneurial environment, in startups, because that's exactly the style of management that they had when they were athletes.
Understanding that you're not trying to peak and set a personal best on the 25th, but this project may take 6, 8, 10 months, and it's just to get it completed and move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. But as an entrepreneur, it's like, I need to get this to market Wednesday or we all starve. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think also athletes, have it's you're living in a world that's pretty flat. It's your team and your coach. Where if you have to go through different level of organization and have things being approved, that can be a little bit more difficult. Having to deal with office politics and all that sort of stuff. So those are some of the challenges. But I think athletes are very well placed to have a great transition and make good stride in their professional career. They just need to be ready to relearn again, and not feel that they are do something because they've invested so much in one field. So I think if they can look at their professional career with a growth mindset and a will to learn, and not be afraid to be vulnerable in a certain field, even if they reach the top in another field, then they'll be very well placed for the next step.
Okay, so if you would, in broad terms, take us through what you would do with someone, how you would set them up for, I just retired, I was a world-class athlete, and now I have no idea what I'm going to do. How do you put them in that position?
Yeah, the way we work with athletes soul is twofold. So for that athlete specifically, we would go through a transition coaching program. So we would pair them with a former athlete who is also a professional coach, and they would work with that person for a number of months. But first, before they actually start that actual work with the coach, we would evaluate where they at. You may have an athlete who is really struggling with body physical changes, not having a routine, or perhaps identity loss, or have no idea what they want to do next. But you can also have an athlete who was a college athlete, really passionate about what they did at school as well. They have a good support system. They have a fairly good idea of where they want to go next. Those two profiles are completely different and will require different type of support. So we would first evaluate where they are, what their needs are, and then put them into the right program. At this point, we offer two programs. One is dealing with the transition from a holistic perspective, where we look at your identity, your life purpose, what you're going to do next, maybe doing a little bit of exploration, and then eventually figuring out a plan to move forward. Where we have a second program that is more related to career coaching. And basically the goal of that program is to go from what you already have and help you accelerate your transition into the business world. So, but regardless, we pair an athlete with a professional coach and have them work together. So the coach is there to help and guide them. The athlete really is the one that defines what these goals are and what is definition of success is for the next step. And the coach helps support them through that process.
Something you said that I hadn't thought about because I was never on that level, but how difficult is it, and is that maybe the most difficult thing to do, is to define your identity? Because I'm who I am and I've been that way since 3 years old, but I've never been defined, to my knowledge, as Olympic champion or world-class athlete or commercial endorser or any of that thing. I've just been me. But you are talking about separate personas, basically.
Yeah, I think it's probably the biggest challenge that every athlete that of a higher level elite athlete will struggle with is the loss of identity. If I am not an athlete, what am I? And I think there is this idea that your self-worth is basically just linked to your athletic performance.
Right.
And so when that's left, a lot of them really talk about a crisis of identity and trying to figure out what they are then. And this goes from the way they introduce themselves is going to be different to how they interact with family. And, I've heard a lot of athletes say, all I've talked about is my sport with family members. And now I don't have that. And I really don't have, and they will,
right.
A lot of it is perception, but they will feel they have nothing of value to share or have no topic of interest that they can share with others. So I think the identity crisis is a big one. And it requires effort from the athletes. So there is a period of grieving, just like you would do with the loss of someone, where you have to deal with the loss of a part of yourself with your sport, and how you move forward from that. Then, is
it easier to do it if, I hate to say it this way, if you had a career-ending injury, or you just know that you're past your prime, say that you went to, you didn't make the Olympic team, or you didn't do this because of the way, just because you weren't able to compete at that level again? So is it easier to say, I know I'm not that person anymore, as opposed to, I'm going to retire because the Olympics are over with and I'm not going to go back again. I'm not going to do the grind again. But you're still in that mindset of, I'm still this guy, I'm still a champion.
Yeah, I think there are, I don't know if there's one easy way. I think every situation is really different, and you have highlighted quite a few of them, career-ending injury, being deselected, not making the cut, not reaching your goal, getting too old, your sport, or sometimes it goes also be some external factors, like, your government decide not to send you to the Olympics because it's the 1980 boycott.
Right.
So there's a lot of reason, or right now with the cancellation of championship, a lot of athletes ended their career without choosing it, without a completion of a season. There are many, many different reasons for the end of the career. I think what makes it easier or harder is really how well-rounded the athlete is, whether the athlete has developed interest outside of sport during their career, how much perhaps their environment has put value on their athletic performance. If everything is about that result on the field, and that others in your circle also reinforce that message, then it might be fairly difficult. I think having a good, stable education also is a factor in this. So there are many, many different elements, and it really depends on the athletes.
Well, I know that you've got to run. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'd love to be able to touch base with you on me about, you know, that thing. Well, yeah, I did this and I did that, but then that transition was really hard, and without having someone to help them walk through it, maybe we can combine things. Do me a favor, just tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find Athletes Whole, all that good fun stuff, all the Twitter stuff, and just a little self-promotion, if you will.
Absolutely. Thank you. And first of all, thank you for having me and taking the time to talk about my story and Athletes Whole. It's much appreciated. You can find us, you can find all the information on our website. So it's athletessoul, SOUL.space. And you'll have tons of information on other former athletes and their transition, resources on how to help you, information about our events, as well as my contact information and the rest of the organization. So I really encourage everybody to go on our website. We're obviously available on social media as well, but the best way to find us is our website.
Okay, well, Myriam, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm glad you're able to squeeze us in, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks to you. Have a great day too.